One of my quotes was, "You catch more honeys with fly." I mean, no, woof.
You catch more flies with honey, baby.
Catch more flies with. You catch more honeys by being fly.
Hey everyone, welcome back to our podcast, As Above,
So below.
I'm your co-host, Sower. My pronouns are they, she. I'm a Pisces rising, Sagittarius sun, Taurus moon.
And I am your co-host, Toni. I am a Pisces rising, Taurus sun, Libra moon. My pronouns are she, her. And we are excited to have y'all back for another episode. Yeah. So just something we want to try to do every episode just for our real advanced astrology people who like to, time things. We want to just let y'all know when we're recording and the time of recording so you can kind of see like what's the vibes like for this recording. We didn't like elect the chart or anything, but today is Monday, September 5th, and it is 4:29 p.m. And so we're really excited to bring you this first episode on our series on the astrological axes.
Yes. So today we'll be focusing on the Aries-Libra axes. So I guess we'll do a little explanation on what the axes themselves are. And we also have a visual to accompany that for those of you watching on our video cast.
We definitely wanted to just show y'all a list of all the axes just for everybody watching and for anyone who might be newer to astrology or just needs a reminder. We just wanted to list all of these out so you can see what the axes that we're talking about are, and just so you can kind of get a sense of like what sign is opposing your sun sign, if you know that. So Aries is always opposite Libra. That's the Aries-Libra axis. That's what we're talking about today. But as you can see, it goes on, and every sign has a little buddy, which is why sometimes they're called sister signs. That's what the axes are. And I think a good way for us to just start this episode, since it's the first one in the series, is just to talk a little bit more about, why we wanted to begin our podcast on this subject and, just a little bit about what the axes mean to us.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that personally, a big part of the reason I love astrology, and I think I touched a little bit on this in the introduction episode, is because of the complexity and depth of it, and the fact that I feel like no matter how much I know, there's always so much more to learn. And as a Sagittarius, like I love that. So I feel like the axes are a good place to start in terms of that, in terms of going a little deeper on what each sign themselves represent or mean or bring to the surface. I know that a big part of the reason why I feel like I was inspired to do like the axes in the first place was actually I was talking to my sister, who, if you remember, Toad, my sister's a Scorpio, and I was talking to her about Tauruses. So I feel like I should give credit where it's due, she was like discussing a lot of things that I don't think I had been like really conscious of when it came to Tauruses, because I feel like I just blindly loved them as a Taurus moon. She was just like shedding light on things that I didn't really feel I had seen before. She was like explaining how a lot of the things that she saw about them were because they were her opposition, and she was like comparing it to Scorpio. And I feel like when I talked to Toni about that, it just like fueled this whole conversation that was like hours, and we were just talking about specifically the Taurus Scorpio axis. I feel like it really like propelled us to like really look at what these oppositions really looked like for us.
Yeah, no, I feel like as you were talking, it just made me think about, the person in the zodiac wheel, like oppositions are always going to be like directly across from each other. And
Right.
so for a Scorpio to be able to kind of tell Tauruses about themselves in a way that's like, in a scorpionic way, it just kind of makes me think about, sometimes you need that outsider to look at you and tell you like, okay, this is what you're doing. Like I see you very clearly from across the zodiac. This is what you are up to.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, and I feel like for me, it just seemed like a perfect way to start, not only because of how much like natural conversation, Silver and I were already having about the topic, but also I think it really speaks to like the inherently relational aspect of astrology. As I sort of mentioned in the first episode, like it's so multi-layered. It's about like, these beings in the cosmos speaking to each other. And it's about the signs speaking to each other, especially when you consider that, we have all of these signs like represented somewhere within our chart. So it's just a reminder that everything is a conversation and like how much more meaning can be derived when you look at things as a conversation in a relationship versus just looking at things in isolation. Like you're not really going to get anywhere in astrology if you look at something in isolation. So yeah, it's an axis. The axes is a very blatant reminder of this, of like for every sign has another sign that's bringing, another perspective, but they're all along like this kind of continuum. And I think, Silver and I both think of like the axes as like these spectrums of, existence. And like, yes, they're oppositional, but like it's really about like, there's so much more in between these binaries if you allow yourself to like really examine all that.
Yeah. And I feel like just when we were talking about that, we just noticed that it's way more of a spectrum, right? Than opposites. Like, I don't know. I feel like when you really think about it, them in relation to each other, it's just like there's so much that they have to say about each other.
Right. Like when I
But
when I say opposites, I feel like I'm not thinking in terms of binaries. I'll feel like the word is kind of inherently like,
yeah,
but like I feel like I'm more so talking about this is the position that they have. They're
yeah,
opposite each other. So it's kind
right.
of like when you're opposite someone, that doesn't mean that you can't have similarities. You're still along one line. So you have something that's connecting you to even be
Right.
opposite. Like, right.
Exactly. And I feel like that's something that I feel like should be talked about more just in general because like obviously when you think opposites, I feel like there's certain like signs that definitely like you can see that opposition a little bit more, right? But then at the same time there is like you said they're on the same like line, on the same axis. And I feel like when you think opposite, you think nothing to do with each other, but realistically I feel like the reason that we wanted to have these discussions is because like they absolutely do have a lot to do with
Exactly.
each other.
Exactly. So it's very much for me, and I think Silver too, about holding space for like duality or multiplicity, allowing for many things to be true at once. Like that's a huge
Exactly.
thing that I really hope listeners and us too, Silver and I,
Right.
take away from this conversation around like having compassion for the sides of yourself. Like you might hear things that you really relate to or things that you've identified in yourself that you dislike or something, but I really hope people have more compassion for the fact that these two things can exist within one person and like how much power that really like holds for you to be like such a like
Exactly.
a faceted person and be able to tap into all of these different energies that like everybody has within them.
Right. Even having these conversations has just like led me to have so much more compassion and understanding for the signs. And while like yes, in my head I know that outwardly it doesn't always come out that way. It's like you can really dislike a lot about a sign or dislike a lot about a person even, but when you really like I feel like when you really know someone, there's beautiful aspects of everything and everyone. And I feel like that's so like important to note that like there could like both
Yeah.
those things can be true. You
Yeah.
know,
And
there's
I
good,
mean,
there's ugly.
no, I think what you're saying is completely correct. I'm like, listen, I don't want to. I honestly, when people feel hatred and dislike of things, like I hate to stomp that out. Like I feel like that's important too. But like also like let's just like get more language around why that is. Like I think it's fine to like
Exactly.
hate people, but it might really just be their personality, or it might be
And
other things that are happening.
I feel like that also goes for that like conversation of like, you know, people like dislike the things that are often mirrored back to them, or like it's like if you just like something about someone often it's like because there's things about yourself that you might not like. And I feel like well yes, sometimes you might think like really you just don't like someone, but I feel like if you really go to the root of it, you can always like find some similarity in
Right.
that and in yourself. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of these sister signs and oppositions in general. So
Yeah, I think mirror is a good one. I think they kind of hold a mirror up to each other. And so, yeah, I feel like this conversation will help everyone to be like just more skeptical of things that seem binary at first and just kind of be like, like what's actually
like,
if
let's
we
question it.
yeah, let's get into it a little bit more
Let's
because like
get a little deeper. Yeah.
you might discover something that that you didn't even realize through the relationship, like not just
Exactly.
the signs by themselves, not just Aries on its own or Libra on its own, but through the relationship between Aries and Libra. Like, what are you learning about like life?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, so before we like, really get into it, we did want to kind of give a disclaimer just about, Silver and I's background and like where we're coming from when it comes to astrology. Again, like we are not practicing astrologers. We do not do any kind of consultations. We are really like astrology enthusiasts. Like we love it. We love to talk about it. And we're like obviously learning about it as we talk about it. So I think throughout this episode, we have, we're not just out here saying like bullshit, but I encourage everyone listening to like, if this is something that piques your interest, like please read more. Like, don't ever leave it at one source. Like, read
Right. Yeah.
more and consume more. Like, it's just good for, one, because obviously we don't know everything, but two, just like to help you to develop your own sort of relationship to astrology, like we have. Like, I feel like you have to kind of engage it from a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, our placements and our chart will influence a lot of how we view this and stuff. So it's going to be different, just like depending on like who you are as a person, like what your placements are. So it's always cool to see like your own relationship with these signs in a different light or in a different perspective than, others. So
Yeah. So we're still going to speak like, like we know what we're talking about.
right. We're trying to be as objective as possible, but
Right.
there
Yeah.
will be moments where we have, our own thoughts or
Yeah.
perspectives on things, and that's
Right.
okay. And that's what we kind of wanted to share in the first place. Yeah.
Exactly. And I encourage everyone to develop their own. And then we can have, that's where the good stuff starts happening.
Bigger dialogue.
Yeah. Dialogue. Everything. Go
So
ahead.
now we can talk a little bit about where these signs fall in our own charts and what placements or planets we do have in these signs, specifically of Aries and Libra. So for me, um, my Aries falls into my second house. The only sign that I have in that house is Saturn. And then my seventh house is ruled by Libra. And my Mars is in that house, which people talk a little bit more about those specific placements and
Oh, look at that malefic
planets.
opposition right there.
Literally. But
So,
we'll get into that in literally like 5 minutes. But that's just funny, and we'll
yeah.
explain why, I guess.
Cool. So yeah, because Silver and I are both Pisces rising, so we're gonna have a lot of similar stuff going on. But so my second house is also, an Aries. I do use whole sign houses, so my eighth house is actually Libra instead of Silver seventh. So we have second and eight for me. And for planets in those houses and in those signs, I have an Aries stellium, which basically just means more, I think like three or more planets in a sign. So I have Mercury, Venus, and Saturn in Aries. I know, wild.
Mm.
And then I have my cute little Libra moon in my eighth house. So I have an opposition going on between the moon in Libra in the eighth house, and then my Venus, Saturn, and Mercury in the second house in Aries.
Yeah.
I'm literally like acting like I have my chart out right now.
You're like
um,
there and
but I do encourage everybody listening to like pull up your chart, whatever you use to do it. I usually use astro.com or I'll use like one of my apps and just follow along with us as we're talking because I think it's helpful to be like, to be able to tell us or to, as you're listening, just for yourself to know where Aries is in your chart and where Libra is in your chart. Cool. So if you're wondering where Aries falls in your chart, the little glyph that I have, and I can't even like do a pointer here, but the thing directly underneath the word Aries, that is the symbol for Aries. I'm sure Aries know this, but people who are not Aries suns might not. So yeah, look for that in your
yeah,
chart.
that little ram.
So we're just gonna do a rundown of, what is Aries astrologically. So we're gonna use some language you might be familiar with, you might not. We'll try to explain as best as we can, but again, research, baby.
Let's research,
Let's
baby.
research.
Let's research, baby girl. Gina Rodriguez.
Yes, that's okay. We're recording right now. So yes. So element of Aries is fire, fire signs, Aries, Sag, Leo. But Aries is fire sign. The modality is cardinal. The ruler, or it might be called like domicile, is Mars. So Mars is at home in the environment of Aries. That's Mars is domicile. The detriment is Venus, and the sun is exalted in Aries, and Saturn is in its fall in Aries. And we'll get into what this stuff means, but these are just the qualities, like these are the basic sort of building blocks of what makes Aries Aries, basically.
Yeah. All right. So next we have Libra. It's pretty. It's like a Libra would be. Right under it is the symbol or glyph for the Libra. So the element is it's an air sign. So other air signs include Gemini and Aquarius. It's Gemini, Aquarius, and Libra. The modality, it's a cardinal sign as well. The ruler or its domicile is in Venus. Mars is in detriment in Libra. Saturn is exalted in Libra. The sun is in fall. The sun falls in Libra, and it is also a diurnal sign.
Yes. So I'm not going to keep this up, but yeah, again, this is just a way for everyone to kind of see what are the basic building blocks that make up Aries and Libra. And obviously, if you're watching, you can always do a little pause, write it down, go research, or if you don't care, if you're going to remember, that's fine too. Cool. So I think that one way that sort of helps Silver and I to, just think more and really feel into the signs is just to think about those building blocks and really like kind of like build up an understanding of it going, by each sort of category. So the first thing we looked at was like the element of it. So for example, we're going to start off with Aries because they're first. Aries is always first. And we're going to talk a little bit about fire and what does the fire element in general mean to us. And then we're going to go into like, what does it mean to be cardinal fire and cardinality? And so this will help us to kind of like explain to y'all what these signs end up meaning for us.
Right. Okay, so like let's get into a little bit of what fire represents for us. For me, I would say fire represents, passion. It represents strength, I guess. It also to me represents a lot of like a desire. I think fire can be really destructive. But it can also, like when you think of a fire and you think of like something burning completely, it leaves room for like growth, for something new to be built over it. Like when you think of ashes. And yeah, what does fire mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a lot of the same words that you have. I have hot, dangerous, eye-catching, in motion, kinetic, electrifying. I thought about like, bro, like fire is the best I'm not invention, but like us humans discovering how to use fire. Like we're literally using fire right now.
Exactly.
Zoom.
Yeah. And like just even light, even like seeing,
Ooh,
things for what they
sight.
Are, seeing the truth.
Fire is sight. Like I feel like, and it has a life of its own, but it is not life sustaining. You can't. I don't know unless you're a dragon. What can live in fire? But no, like yeah, only dragons I think can live in fire. So it's not, but fire itself, like I had my candles lit yesterday and I could just see, like I love watching fire dance. Like it's so like I said, eye-catching. You kind of have to like watch because it's like yeah, now we've covered fire. Aries is a fire sign, but Aries is also a cardinal sign. And so I think it's important for us to talk about what does being a cardinal sign mean.
Right. So I would say cardinality are like they're the initiators, the go-getters. I would say like the starters. They begin things, front runners. And like I feel like for Aries specifically, Aries starts off not only the fire signs, but it's like the entire astrological year as well.
Yeah, same thing, honestly. The initiator, the cardinal signs are providing the direction. Like once you reach the cardinal point, it's like, okay, we're changing directions and we're starting. Like they're not the actual change itself, but they are the start. They're the beginning. And like Silver mentioned, Aries is the first fire sign. It's the first sign of the zodiac. Like that's some serious momentum right there. One of my Aries phrases is hit the ground running because it's like I feel like you like it's because you're starting. There's so much to start. It's like it has to be a big start.
Yeah, and then when you put that alongside with fire, it being like all the cardinal fire sign, and associating it with those words of passion, of like all of the things that we had just named, I feel like that's just another level of cardinality. Like they all have their own manifestations of what that word might mean, I guess. But I feel like with fire, that's the most like they're ready.
And it can be aggressive, but it's just that is like how can you not be aggressive if you are starting a fire? Like you are literally like, it's in your face, it's bold, it's like it's the spark that like does the thing. So now let's get into another building block of Aries, which is Mars, its ruler. So I'll get into some Mars things. I have some there's a few quotes I have from other astrologers that I like really, respect and love their work. So Demetra George in her book Astrology and the Authentic Self, I believe, she talks about Mars as the capacity to act and be assertive based on desire. And I wanted to include this because I think Silver and I have had, conversations about where does desire fit in for Mars. And so I was sort of thinking about like, well, what does Mars really desire? Like, obviously you have, Mars wants to be active and assertive, but when it comes to what Mars desires, I think it is that passion. It's that freedom, exhilaration, achievement, like that feeling of like being on the mountaintop and being kind of on top of the world. I do think Mars wants to feel like Mars kind of like is like the sun, like it's like bow down, like this is looking like,
when I think of that, I'm like, what drives you? What is like the passion? Like what gives you that passion? What motivates you? And I feel like that is the Mars energy, is like the drive, the desire, like you said.
It's like that, it's that feeling. It's like it's so hard to kind of put words to it sometimes, but I feel like Mars is a very like embodied instinctual thing. And I think Aries is like that too.
Right.
But if you ever just feel like you're just on go, like it doesn't have to, for some people it is through working out. Like working out is a way to get that experience. For some people it might be like reading or just doing your thing.
Something that you feel passionate about, something that brings you life, I feel like.
Life.
I think that for me, like being who I am, I don't know, like passion is what makes me feel like alive, like I feel like life in the sun sense is more of like your identity.
I feel like it's less embodied. Like I feel like Mars is about the body. It's
exactly the like the instinct of passion.
Some other words I have for Mars is agency, action, assertion, aggression, and severance and destruction. I mean, Mars is really like it is a planet of war. And so the things that come along with war, Mars is about that too. It's about that action. It's about that,
It's about that action. Whereas also in your chart, Mars can be representative of sex, of like lust and desire, that action, like the passion.
Yes,
I feel like.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say
I
had a quote. I said Mars is the passion of sex. I think Venus is the pleasure.
Yeah.
And I think you need both, obviously, to have a good sexual experience. So like Mars is really passionate, but like sometimes you need sex to also be like attuned to your needs. Mars might not always be like the passion be there, but like it might not necessarily be like, how can I make you like feel good kind of sense.
But it's like, how can I make me feel good?
Yeah.
I feel like
For sure. Mars is definitely like this.
Which is also, I feel like it's giving Aries.
Yeah. Yeah. So Aries, if you think about this fire sign ruled by this planet of action, of war, of independence, right? Like, how do you get that through fire? Being bold, being like
courageous, being confident,
yeah, like putting yourself out there and starting shit. And that's how you're gonna help when a planet rules a sign, like I think of it as like that sign is trying to carry out that planet's goal. And that sign is one of the best sort of capable to carry out the goal. So Mars, so Aries is gonna do Mars shit, right? Like
yeah,
we can talk about the sun, briefly. Aries is exalted in the sun. And so when a planet is exalted in an environment, I think of it to mean like that sign is able to easily sort of like
it's that it's like its highest expression.
yes, it's its highest expression, and it's also exalted, like people, it's recognizable. People like see it and they're like put it on a pedestal. Like so when it comes to Aries suns, like when the sun is in Aries, like it's basically just like an environment in which the sun is able to very easily embody that sort of vitality and that like what the sun is about is like your core purpose. It's your central organizing principle. It's a force, and everything revolves around the sun. So your sun sign is important. And I think when the sun is in Aries, it's able to really access those characteristics. And I feel like, yeah, Aries suns just have this sort of ease of ego. Like their ego comes easily to them because it's all they know. Yes, and that can be, a positive or a shadow thing, but ultimately what the sun is about is like let that shit through, let that shit shine. And Aries is able to do that very
with ease.
Yeah,
exactly. Like I feel like that's the biggest thing is that it is natural to them, instinctive almost. It doesn't require like work at all, whereas like Libra is not necessarily the same in that way. But yes, like I feel it's like that's the potential. It's like you're on a throne in that house, and that's like, I mean, in that planet, and people just like can see you regardless of if you want to be seen or if that's what your goal is,
Yeah, and I feel like if you think of the sun as like the quote unquote, I don't want to say king, but it's like the sun is the noble sort of ruler in your chart. And I feel like Aries, like when the sun is in Aries, it's just like, oh, steps right up to the plate. Like I was already gonna rule anyways. Like I didn't need the sun.
So you were born into it. That's what you were born to do. It's like when you're born into royalty and
yeah, not to encourage every Aries sun to like try to rule people.
No.
That, but
they don't need the encouragement.
Right. Anyways,
they know who the fuck they are, basically.
That's literally it about Aries. Let's move to Libra and talk about the building blocks of Libra.
Yeah. Okay, so on what air might mean to us or be representative of for us. Air. I feel like when I think of air, I think it can be just as powerful, I think of tornadoes, I think of wind. I think that while it can't always be seen, its presence is like obvious. I feel like that is also kind of more so like the intellectual nature of an air sign is like it's not always seen, but like it's there, it can also be a sense of peace, a sense of calm when you're like outside and like the wind is blowing and it's about to be a storm or something, but it can also be terrifying. It can be like moving, it can move you in like any which direction.
Yeah, those are some good imagery for air. I feel like, air is all around us. And I've been thinking about it as like this omnipresent sort of force. Like, and also it's invisible. That's so sneaky. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean.
like that's actually sneaky as fuck because I'm like fire, like you
Like you
only
can't see it, but it's there. That's scary.
like they spying on you. Like, but that's kind of, and I also think, you know, more symbolically, air signs all sort of they are I feel like they're all very intrigued and like motivated by human connection and like in
And that's
some kind of
actually,
way.
yeah. And I feel like they are the ones that, like air, for example, air affects everyone. Like everybody is affected by it. Whereas fire, what we were talking about, like, you can feel it if you're close to it, if you're near
Mm,
it, if it's like in your sight. But with air, it's like that's everywhere, like
yeah. And
that's
I
like
think
really interesting in the sense of like Gemini's, Libras, Aquarius, all being very concerned with their community and their environment. And it's like the external part of them.
yes.
So,
If someone's on fire, that don't mean you're gonna be on fire. But if the air is polluted, that's an everybody thing. And I think that kind of lends itself to the perspective that air provides and being able to kind of be, you know, able to see everything. Like they're gonna give
mhm.
you a perspective, and so a lot of times they'll claim objectivity. It's not always objectivity, but I will admit that they have a little bit more of a wider perspective than the other elements because I
Yeah.
feel like they have this unique sort of adaptability and like they can kind of move through a lot of different spaces. You can't really
Mhm.
block air out. So they're going to give you
Exactly.
a perspective that's a little bit, different.
I love
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's so fun to really think about the air sign people in your life and think about how they embody that, or even the fire sign.
Yeah.
Like, think about like how you've experienced that through air people in your life.
Mhm.
I'll add just interconnection, light-weighted, light-hearted. I had observant. I said it's everywhere and nowhere all at once. When you think about nowhere, like everywhere but nowhere, like Libra is everywhere, but it is not good. Like the sun isn't good in Libra because it doesn't want to
Right.
see the
And it's
visible.
barely there because they're so concerned about everyone around them or like their community that it's like their presence is not known, but they are there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
know,
Like they're
like
not
it is.
necessarily commanding the entire room, but they are like moving it. They're like
In
moving to
a
the
sneaky
background.
way, in the same way of like that air, which like they do want harmony and they want like within the community, but they do it in such like I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like Libras
They,
are so like socially like I don't even know like
they're smooth.
gifted.
Yes,
They're
they're
gifted.
so smooth. Like Libras do it in such a smooth way. All right,
Exactly.
let's before we get into that, let's go to we've already talked about cardinality. Libra is
Okay.
another cardinal sign.
No, so
So
Venus.
yes.
Okay, so what Venus means to me. When I think of Venus, I think beauty, I think um art, I think love. Those are like obviously the like the first thing. Like I feel like I think of perspective. I don't know why that just came to my mind, but like perspective in a way in which it can almost be okay. I feel like this is more Libra, but controlling perspective.
Mm,
Like a more controlled perspective, a more like performed perspective, I
mm,
guess.
okay.
Um like it's like they
Let's say the performance, and I think control. I think Venus kind of wants devotion, and like Venus wants
exactly.
to be worshipped.
Right.
I think Venus wants to be worshipped. Like Venus wants that.
Which of course it's a planet of art and like beauty. Of course, like that
Like, why would you
is
not?
what exactly. And it's also like it rules those things as well. So like it's like those things do want, devotion. They want to be recognized
Mhm.
or like worshipped, I guess, like is a way of like thinking about it, but more so like seen, I feel like.
Yeah. And I don't think they want forced worship. Like I feel like Mars wouldn't mind forced
Exactly.
worship. Venus wants it to feel like you just can't, like you can't
You
resist
can't
her.
help it. Exactly.
You just
And I
need
feel like
Venus.
when you think of Venus and like Taurus and Libra, it's like they go about it in different ways, which we will talk more about in the Taurus episode as well. But it's still like it's still that like that desire to be recognized and to be worshipped.
And
I don't know
desired.
like
I would say desired too. Does the
yeah,
desire
to
to
be
be
yeah,
desired.
yeah, I guess what we were just discussing would be the shadow as well. To me, anyway, like that is like a more like I don't know, to like want to control the perspective, to not just like be as you are or like show up, I guess, like as authentically, but it's like, is Venus really showing up inauthentically? I think they are showing up authentically. It's just like what is off I don't know, like what is
Oh,
authentic
and
and
this is a
non-authentic.
great, I feel like the axis is a great, like, yeah, they want to be authentic, but how can how can Venus, by tapping into some of those Martian sort of qualities, better do Venus things, right? Like that
Exactly.
authenticity. Like, are you really being authentic or is this about trying to fit in? Because, you know, what
Or
I,
yeah.
for me, Venus, like, I have like, it's about relationships. I think love is great
Yeah,
word
yeah.
for it, but I
Union, partnership.
right, like I feel like it's not just, it doesn't have to just be romantic love, although that's a great, you know, Venus is going to tell you stuff about your romantic
Yeah,
relationships, but I definitely wouldn't make the mistake of like putting romantic love all on Venus's
right.
back because
Right.
love has
Yeah.
a
Because
lot.
it's also like in thinking of how Venus appears in your chart. I keep like relating it back to this, but it's like that's the way in which you love.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily, and that's not, you know, that's not only romantic, that can be platonic, familial, like whatever. Like it's just how you love and I guess like want to be loved in some
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, in
Um,
some ways. I think it's about how you relate to things, how you go about achieving harmony. It's that the part of us that wants to have pleasurable things and interactions. And I think
yeah,
when it comes to Libra,
diplomacy.
Libra specifically, like as we're building, you know, what does it mean to be Libra? This air, you know, cardinal sign that's ruled by Venus. Um, creating, which is a cardinal word, right? Creating relationships that bring pleasure. Creating pleasurable relationships, like that is very key to Libra. And I think as a Libra moon, like having pleasurable interactions, having like just a feeling of balance and harmony between in my one-to-one relationships is like huge
Yeah.
for my emotional stability. So
Yeah, and I feel like we like just to kind of touch on that, like we tried recording this last week, right? And I felt like really like not present in the recording because I feel like oh like I felt like my relationships in my life weren't like as much they weren't like harmonious as I would
yeah.
have liked. And talking to Toni about it, you know, my Libra moon best friend, really put things into perspective, I feel like for me. And I realized that like, and after thinking about it, I was like, my Mars is in Libra. Like what drives me is in Libra. So I feel like if
Mm.
I like can like the way in which you said that like you won't feel at ease, you know, that being your moon sign, you won't feel at ease if your relationships aren't as harmonious as you would like them to be. For me, I feel like it's hard for me to feel motivated
Mm.
or driven if my relationships aren't like good. You know what I mean? So like
Yes.
I
So
don't
that
know.
was a great example of like how having different planets in the sign of Libra are still manifesting in a similar way, but they're, you know, around different
Yeah,
energies. Like mine is
right.
around emotional stability, and so which is around like drive and those
Yeah,
Mars words, right? So
yeah.
never mind. Let's go into the exaltation. So where a planet that has its highest, because we didn't talk about Saturn.
Oh, oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can't forget about Saturn, our friend.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Saturn is exalted in Libra. Yeah, sorry,
Which
we're
what?
we're being
Sorry.
shady to
That I
Saturn.
struggle.
We're
No,
being
no, 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 no. I'm not even, I don't even, I'm being shady to the Libra, like the Libra aspect of it.
okay,
Because
okay.
that to me is wild because I feel like Saturn is the ultimate, like that is the god of boundaries, of limits, of like, and so thinking of like that being exalted in Libra, what comes naturally to Libra, that just surprises me. It's not that I'm at all like, no, that can't be right. Of course, I'm sure there's things I can learn from, like, learn about that to better understand it. But for me, like off the jump, that's just like, what? Like,
Yeah.
but
It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. It definitely makes me, when I first learned that, it made me question like Libras don't have boundaries. Like I feel like that's, as far as stereotypes go, maybe not having boundaries, but more so just not. I feel like I think of Saturn as very serious about their shit. Like Saturnians are not gonna be stepped over. They're not gonna budge to your people please. Like they don't care.
Are boundaries, right? And
Right,
then thinking about Libra's kind of, I guess, like archetype being a people pleaser of many of the things. That just like is so weird to hear that it is.
But it's weird, but we're navigating, we're sitting with it, and I think some of the reasons why I think it works is because of thinking about Venus. I feel like Saturn likes order, likes structure. It likes and you need that Venusian charm to achieve that. And I think Saturn sees that about Venus and is like, okay, like I see what you're doing here. Like this is helping.
That.
Right, like you're helping me to get my structure together because like I need this shit we need to have rules and responsibilities and and the way that rules, they're not going to work if everybody's always fighting.
I feel like in terms of Libra being right about balance, that is something that I can see exemplified, I guess, with Saturn as well. Is balance, is like a need, like is a need for justice, like just like I guess balance requires boundaries to some extent. I think that comes maybe a little later in life for some Libras, but
and maybe Libras might want to tell us like, hey, no, we're not being people pleasers. We are actually like, the reason why we're conflicted is because we know what the fuck we need to, and that's why we're trying to figure out how to balance it. Like
exactly. Like I don't feel like, okay, I'm a Libra sun. I really get, like, I don't get them all the time. I do love them though. I know this doesn't sound like it, but I do love me a good Libra. They're everywhere in my life. I love them. So just saying, we're not just
yeah, I feel like as a Libra moon, I have my Libra sun bestie. Haven't talked to them in a minute, but I love that I had a Libra sun in my life before I knew anything about astrology. Like
I don't know. I tend to be drawn to Libra moons myself.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know. Silver has so many Libra moon friends, and I'm like, can you put like, why don't you connect us?
Literally, I'll start a freaking like support group for y'all. I know you.
I think Libra moons. Like, I do have a Libra moon friend right now, and we just be getting each other. Like, I just love
Libra moons get everyone. That's why I love them. Like, I love them.
Yes, but like I haven't felt that same level of connection. I was like, wow, like this is another level of getting, because it's like we are both, one thing a Libra's gonna do is respond, and I just feel like the responsiveness that like it allows for such a great sort of dynamic. Having Libras together. Okay, anyways, we've already through our conversation been getting into what the signs represent to us. One thing I want to just like mention a few things about Aries. So as far as like in my everyday life, I'm just always thinking about astrology, right? Like it could be any sort of interaction. I'm gonna like, okay, what did this represent? Like what does this mean? I'm a Pisces rising. I just do that. It comes naturally to me. It's like breathing. It's like breathing. So one thing for all of you Game of Thrones fans, this episode is in no way supported or sponsored or anything. I'm just a fan.
Someday.
House of Dragon or House of the Dragon.
Spoiler alert for those of you that haven't watched House of Dragons episode 1 yet. This may like spoil, so I would suggest fast forwarding. How many seconds?
I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute. Okay. No, maybe a little longer. I don't know. Okay. Anyways, so Aries, this is just an Aries moment that I feel like happened in House House of the Dragon. And I'm excited to tell Silver because I haven't told him yet.
Okay, wait for this, guys. Just hold on to your boots.
In the scene where the queen is giving birth, one, we just get to see like how violent and like I don't even know what word, violent, bloody, just birth, the process of birth, giving birth is
Just birth?
like it's not like I feel like when you think of the word birth, it's like new, exciting, fresh. But like the actual act of giving birth is like traumatic. I mean, it literally is
It is
traumatic for the
trauma.
newborn and for the mother. And so I felt like the moment when she's giving birth, like that could have alone been an Aries moment, right? Because this, I think birth, Aries is the first sign, it's the birth of new. Um, and you get to see the blood of birth. Like birth is beautiful, but it's also painful, and it's you're literally severing from your, the wound, and like it's just there's a like the wound, not the wound, but there are wounds involved too. But they have that scene in House of the Dragon interpolated with another scene, and they're going back to back. It's a very specific game where two knights are across from each other. I mean, if you watch the episode, you've seen it.
Yeah,
They run across and they have to try to like knock the other one off of, I think they just have to knock them off the horse.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to lead to like too much blood, but we see the game quickly turns into like they literally just like one of the people
they get off their horses.
Yeah, they get off their horses and just start fighting, which happens in sports games too, sometimes the players fight.
So just
So
get a little carried away. Aries energy.
yeah, I feel like that was like such a, that was Aries. Not to like make Aries sound like this very traumatic sign, but like as far as like the archetype of Aries and it being that very beginning, that birth, but then also like seeing the blood of like fighting and war and like these like
battle,
battles, like that's Mars. And then like you have there's battle when you give birth too, like it looks like
and
you might not be able to distinguish the birth bed from the battlefield with all the blood and all the like,
when you think of the zodiac signs in forms of like the stages of life of the human life, the Aries is like representative of the infant, the newborn. And that actually is so funny because last week when we were talking about this, we also mentioned the conversation with Zodiac Podcast. Kelsey was describing Aries, and before that, I had thought of Aries as an infant, as a baby, not necessarily the violence of the actual birth moment, until she actually was talking about that. She was an Aries, and it's funny because the whole thing was conversations with the zodiac, but the Aries one was like she was just talking. It was just her on her own, kind of moving through that fear, which I feel like is such a Aries description. Like, but she was talking about Aries as the birth moment, not just like being a baby, and how bloody and violent it is. She called it like the violent removal from source. And she was saying how like Aries were one with their mother and now they're all alone, and I guess the trauma that comes with that, the trauma of being removed from not just your own mother, but from source, from God, from wherever you came from, and being thrown into this realm, into this like earthly like plane. And how Aries remembers what came before this violent removal, and it moves throughout its life with that acknowledgement of the alone nature that it is to be a human being. And I remember like hearing that and just being like it was crazy. And then now when we're talking about this, because before we hadn't spoken about the House of Dragon episode, and just thinking about how they literally depicted that in that scene and compared it to battle, to the violence of battle. That was crazy, and that scene is very triggering and traumatizing, just for those of you who do plan on watching it who haven't quite yet. But I feel like that is so representative of what Aries is. And I don't want to say that Aries are fearless in that way. I think that they have fear, but they constantly move through it, and they're constantly moving forward because they must because they have to. And I think that's inspiring and insanely brave and vulnerable in so many ways. But yeah, I
Right.
don't know. That was just really, really cool that we could, connect that back today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I saw it, I was just like, wow, perfect.
Yeah, and like even like Kelsey description of that, like what a
Yeah.
poet. I love that
Right.
description of Aries.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll find this, I hope we'll find this throughout all of the signs, like the ability to really pick what is unique about that sign and to like bring it to life in such a like clear way for listeners and for ourselves. So yeah, like
Right.
that's Aries, like that's that first moment. And it's like when you first enter this world, all you know is how to be yourself. Like you don't know
Yeah.
anything else. You just know
You
how to be
haven't
you.
quite yet been conditioned by society to
Right.
be
So you
anything
just
else.
know you. So therefore, that's how Aries moves throughout the world. Like I know me. That's
I
me.
am me unapologetically.
Right.
I
Yeah.
will show up as myself, like regardless of how it may be digested by other people. Huh?
Right.
That is beautiful.
Beautiful. But let me just add some shadow elements because
Of course,
in
of
being
course.
that, like some things that I've identified are just like being overly self-reliant, not realizing
Hyper
it's
independent.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, hyper independence, which is a trauma response,
Yeah.
trauma from being born into the world. Like literally,
Right.
you are
Yeah.
like that hyper independence, not feeling like you can really depend on anyone, not recognizing where you might falter. You might think you can
Right.
do everything. Like, you know how babies are always like, I can do it, I can do it. No,
Yeah. And like,
you can
no,
always
you
do it.
can't. You
You can't
can't
do
pour
it.
this big thing. You need
Right.
help. And that's
Yes.
okay.
Help, help. I literally had to have this conversation with my younger Aries rising sister. Like, it's okay. And she's a Sag sun. Like, literally have to just let her just
She
do
doesn't need
her.
anyone.
She does not need anyone, but I'm like, it's okay to need people. Like, that's what makes us human.
It's intrinsic, it's human, it's part
Yes.
of life. Like, and I feel like while yes, like some of their shadow things, I guess that I would say is like maybe self-interest, and like their individualism. And while yes, that is great in a capitalist society, um, like humanly, like are within like like what we intrinsically need as humans. You need people. You need like to be around people. You need
Look, Ari
community.
Lennox, I need people. And her
Period.
and
Ari Lennox, the Aries.
look at that. I love it. But no, literally, like, yeah, you need people. I think I also see like a defensiveness because you always ready to battle, which is great, but like maybe you
But
need
why are
to,
you always on the defense?
right. I feel like they're off on offense and defense, but either way, like not everything needs to be a battle, right? And you have to figure out the best use of your energy because Aries is a burnout. Like Aries also represents burnout. It's not a fire that's gonna last forever like Leo.
Mm-hmm.
Like Aries fire is it's gonna be a great start, but it can easily just go away because it's like you've expended all of your energy on that first thing. So therefore you need to pick and choose wisely. What's gonna be the thing, right? You can't make everything the thing that you battle about, or else
Right.
you're not gonna have anything left to sustain it. So of
Right.
course we could talk about Aries forever, but we got to move to Libra too, just to.
Not, but we've gotta move to, first of all, Libra, I'm excited to talk about y'all.
No, I'm excited.
Tony's Aries stellium ass.
Listen,
Damn, we can't talk about me anymore.
but we're still talking about me. Libra moon is my personality. Um, and I mean, we've already talked a little bit about like the building blocks, so I just wanted to like leave space for us to talk a little bit more about, what does it represent for us? Do we have anything we want to add? I think one good Libra thing that we didn't necessarily talk about, but music and like the arts is like so Libra.
It comes so naturally to them. It's
Yeah.
it's really, really beautiful. I feel like in a similar way to Pisces or whatever. I don't know, I will always see that um the similarity between Pisces and Libra. I don't know. I think that they're a lot more similar than people acknowledge.
Yes, I think there's a lot of similarities, but we're talking about Libra. What makes
Okay,
Libra
fine. Libra,
Libra?
Libra. It's just when you get into that Libra energy, you just start thinking about everyone else, you know?
No, literally. I think one thing we both have identified is like for Libras, like other people's comfort and pleasure and experiences in general are important to them. Like
Very
it's
important.
like
Very important.
yeah, like that's not, I will not take that away. Even when a Libra is expressing maybe shadow sides, I will never doubt that a Libra really does want everybody to be happy. They like
Yeah.
is of the highest importance. Like I do think, and it's not necessarily like I've never thought of Libras as necessarily emotional. I think they're still air signs. They're still going to be a little bit more removed from the emotional aspect of life, but I do think they have a lot of integrity. Like they care.
While they may not be emotional, they're sensitive for sure.
Mm.
They're sensitive to their environment, they're sensitive to other people.
Yes,
They
sensitive is
can
a good word.
notice the smallest little like differences. Um, and but I feel like when it comes to their emotions, they will tend to intellectualize them because they are intellectuals and they are air signs. I think some other positive aspects of Libra from my experiences with Libra, I would also say that they do like search for that depth within themselves. I feel like they can help you come to realizations about themselves, I mean, about yourself. And maybe through that is how they can start to see things about themselves. I feel like often um, a lot of learning about them comes through different people or their
Mm.
interactions or their relationships with different people. And that's something that I feel like I can definitely resonate with. Like when I'm giving people advice, I'm like, like let me take a second to like think about how this applies to me. But like mostly like my cousin, who's my best friend, or she's like always there for me. I feel like a lot of the time where I will talk about things that like I'm going through, when she's able to relate it to herself, she starts to notice so many things about her own behavior. And she, like, through her advice to me, she can, like, also like start to like really introspect and like think about her own behavior. And I feel like they have the capacity for that depth, but it won't like be as obvious to them until they have these like interactions with those around them, which
Mm.
yeah. So I would say that Libras are pretty deep.
That's a good word. Like I want to respond to that real quick, because I'm a
Mhm.
Libra moon and we always respond. But yeah, like that is your description about being like taking so much from the interactions that you have in your one-to-one relationships. Like I feel like that's so key for Libras. I
Mhm.
think, you know, people might I feel like people look at Libras and like sometimes one of the stereotypes is shallow. And it's so I'm glad you're
Yeah,
saying that Libras are deep because I feel like to you it might look shallow because it's like, oh, they're just talking to all these people. But like I feel like for Libras, having that interaction and that heart,
that
like that
connection. Yeah,
connection, yeah, I think through that they're able to really discover some really interesting truths about themselves and about the
yeah,
people around them. And like they're not afraid of pushing the like the possibility of what connection can foster and what it can create.
yeah.
And so I really love that you bring that up. It's so important.
They don't want to be stagnant. They don't want to be in the same spot all the time. I think they do want to like they themselves want to grow, not just for other people or whatever, but I think in their connections with other people is how they do it, through that connection and through learning from those around them and from their community. Like in a similar way to Aries, where Aries is always like, oh, I want to expand, I want to like they always want to keep moving. And I think I'm saying expand a lot because I'm Sagittarius, but I feel like in a similar way to that, it's like Aries never want to be in the same place. They never want to like be stagnant. And I think that Libra shares that with them.
Yeah, I think that's the cardinal
They,
element too. I think
exactly.
cardinal
Yeah.
signs are always gonna look for something new.
Yeah, and I feel like that is like a beautiful thing about Libra as well, is that they are constantly wanting to, change, evolve,
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're natural connectors.
Mhm.
They're like, I mean, I think we kind of mentioned this already. Like they really like watching a Libra in action is honestly, I find it so fun because
I love that shit, bro.
like the way they can work a room, like I'm sorry, they're giving Leos a run for their money. They're definitely giving Tauruses a run for their money. Like they can
Yeah.
really, and I think it's to me, it's that beautiful relationship between Venus and air, like Venus as an air
Mm-hmm.
expression, because I think air is like so smart. Like just being able to really like pay attention to what moves people, what makes them upset, what
Yeah.
makes them happy. Like a Libra can also piss you the fuck off because
Yeah.
they probably
Because
know
they
better than
know the buttons
anyone.
to push.
They know
They're
exactly what's gonna make you upset because they have already observed the entire scene and they know like how do I want to interact socially in order to get to my desire of whatever that is, right? Like
Yeah,
harmony,
and
fun.
that's actually really funny that you're saying this because in the idea of that, like following in that idea that every sign is made up by the sign before and after, right? And Scorpio being the one after, and how I feel like in order for Scorpio to be like
Oh
observer
Lord.
that they are, they literally develop that skill from Libra of knowing their environment, of
Mm.
reading people, of reading like
Reading, and that
the
is the read. Libras can read
exactly
down because they
exactly.
are like so it's like they're in their environment, but they're doing this airy way of like, I see
I mean, like
everything.
having a Libra rising sister and just watching how she commands the room and how she really makes such a difference in the environment, like in like let's say like in having a good time, like her presence is like it just automatically like shifts.
It's
Well, she's always
key.
making sure that people are like comfortable and that as she like they don't like to make anyone feel left out. Like they like for everyone to be like to feel a part of like whatever's going on.
Right. And
And I
that
mean, if they don't
requires,
care, if they don't like you, that's different. They
yeah,
might not
yeah,
care as much, but
right.
even still, they'll do what they
Right. Like
can to
I
make
feel like
sure, like they'll feel bad.
I feel like every sign, everything that they can use as a weapon for good, they can use as a weapon for evil if turned the wrong way.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. Which
so
is
I
cool.
think that,
Mhm.
yeah, if the same way a Libra will know, how to make things great for you, I feel like they're also going to have a lot of insight into how to make things bad for you.
A more on some more positives, I think that Libras have a very high capacity of like empathy
Mm-hmm.
and compassion. They can always like picture themselves in your shoes. Like
Yeah.
it's actually so funny. Like my cousin, the one I was talking about earlier, like she literally cannot like even watch shows that are even the slightest bit cringy because she gets like secondhand embarrassment to the point
Mm.
where she cannot like she physically cannot do it. And it's like it's so weird to me, but I'm like, no, like she's just has such a like it's the
No, like
empathy. Like it's
I
just like she
can't do it
literally can't.
either. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely. I mean, I think a lot of people probably experience this, but I think Libras might find themselves experiencing it more.
Yeah,
Where it's
it's
like discomfort for anyone is like really uncomfortable for you.
mm-hmm.
And so therefore, let's get to the shadow. Honestly, because you're so worried about the discomfort of others, I feel like that's where Libras might get branded as people pleasers when it's more so just like I think it's being worried about the discomfort of others, but Libras do need to be wary of ways in which they are prioritizing other people's comfort over their own.
Or
Um,
taking responsibility
mm,
for how others like
oh, that's a great one.
feel, like it's not your responsibility to make all these people feel good. When you think about that, it's like that is um like self-interested because
Mm.
like you're doing it because you're uncomfortable that they're uncomfortable.
Oh,
You're not
oh,
doing it because you actually are like, oh, I feel bad that they're uncomfortable. You're just like, I can't watch you be uncomfortable, so I have to make it better.
right. Which is why I think Libra can sometimes get, and this is where I think the shallow part comes in because it's like you want the illusion of peace and harmony,
Exactly.
even if shit is
Exactly.
not sweet, but you still want you want to pretend, you want everybody to pretend it's sweet, which is like,
Exactly.
things, that's how things can, be fake and stuff. Another thing
Exactly.
I wanted to mention, I think having a Libra moon has been, a very wonderful and, just a journey, honestly. All my But Libra moon especially, I think this is a good, I came up with Libra lessons I'm learning. And one of the things I literally wrote this down, and it's other people don't have to see or understand your feelings or perspective in order for them to be important or like on their own. I think Libras oftentimes are looking for validation of their decision, of their persona, because being Venus's child, like, Libra is, Venus is at home in Libra. I think you get this, I don't want to say obsession, but you have this desire to be accepted and for everything to be smooth. So you're constantly looking for external validation. Yeah, for a Libra lesson that I'm learning is just that if I'm feeling a certain way, I don't have to immediately try to go to someone and be like, do you see where I'm coming from? Like, do you like, I'm feeling this way, right? Do you agree that I'm feeling this way? Do you realize how wild that statement is, even in of itself? Like,
Yeah, and I don't know where I fall into that, but I definitely can resonate with that. And feeling that way and feeling that need for that validation of how you're feeling. Another shadow aspect is like, like they can be overthinkers, and that goes back to how we were saying like that they are so observant of their environment and of everything, and like noticing the smallest of changes in anything. Like they will feel a shift, and while it hasn't been brought to their attention, or while it hasn't been, this is something we actually discussed last week or whatever, like until it is brought to your attention, it's not necessarily your responsibility to fix or to try to like mend. And I feel
Libra
like
is action oriented in that way. Like if they
exactly.
feel something off, they want to try to resolve it.
Yeah, and while yes, they like thrive in these harmonious environment, they're not always vocal about how best to achieve that, because I feel like also connecting back to how they might be perceived in expressing themselves or whatever. And I think that's really at the end of the day part of the journey of Libra, is learning to be okay with not being accepted or validated externally, because at the end of the day, like not everyone will always understand where you're coming from in the same way that Libras will. And I think that that's also part of it, is like they always can understand where someone's coming from, so they're like, why can't you? Like,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a struggle. Not being able to understand why people can't basically operate the way that you're operating. And I think every sign struggles with it for their own little thing.
yeah,
And I think Libra's struggle is like, I'm trying to understand you. You can always count on a Libra to try to understand. Now, whether they'll
exactly.
get it, I don't know, but they're gonna try because they want to
Yeah,
resolve shit. They want to get understanding. But it's like for Libras, for you to not give them that same respect is, I think that hurts Libras a lot. Like I feel like it's like, I'm trying to see you. Why aren't you trying to see me? We're still going to try to get to that point of understanding. Even if it's not agreement, they're going to try to get to the point of like, okay, I'm seeing you, because they want to
yeah,
understand you.
yeah.
And I think that, so I think when a Libra is disappointed that they're not getting the same understanding, it could be a few different things. It could be that, again, are you leaning on other people to understand you in order for you to understand yourself? Because that's something that Libras do too, where it's like, it doesn't make sense to me until someone else tells me it makes sense. Um, or is it actually you're dealing with someone who just doesn't want to see you, like
Yeah.
who's willfully ignorant, which I think is actually a downside of Aries. But I think we're already talking about it, so like
So
let's
let's get
talk
into
about
it.
it.
Let's get into it.
Like, I think as we're having these conversations about the signs individually, you can hear different things if you either know about Aries or if you just remember from what we were talking about earlier. You can hear how these are
They
along,
connect.
yeah, a
Exactly.
spectrum, like a continuum. So cool. Moving on to the axis.
So I would say like a phrase, and you said this earlier, severance, like severing to unite, I feel like is something that I feel like really embodies the axis in general, and the idea of, like separating yourself in order to have a more harmonious union, of like kind of like knowing yourself in order to really know someone else or understand someone else.
Right, yeah. I hate to like bring up that statement because I feel like it's overused and honestly is manipulated, but you know, you can't love other people until you love yourself.
So
Like,
you love yourself.
yeah, like it's kind of like that, although I do think it's much more complicated. Again,
Yeah.
both can exist at once, right? How about the idea that in order to, like, you are constantly loving yourself and loving other people, and that's what it
Exactly.
means to
Yeah.
be alive, right? So, and just as a reminder, remember anything that we're talking about around the self is going to be Aries, and then anything we're talking about around others is going to be Libra. But
Union or
yeah, but we also want to try to bridge the gap between those two so you can see, like, maybe you won't always separate Aries and Libra so much because you'll start to see how they're kind of crossing over into each other's territory. I think I had a few, like, phrases. I had axis of freedom, axis of agency, and axis of impact. I think axis of freedom is important for me because it makes me think about, like, freedom within oneself versus interdependent freedom, or independent versus interdependent freedom. And I think freedom is a very, like, complex, dynamic, ever evolving sort of journey, really. But I think Aries and Libra give us insight into what's required for freedom. Like, Aries is letting you know, like, you can't get free until you are free within yourself, until you allow yourself to show up and express, like, allow your energy to express itself exactly how it's supposed to, and not filter yourself, and not doubt yourself. Like, you need a freedom, you need to have a freedom within yourself to be you and be, you know, proud of you. Honestly, I think
yeah.
pride is involved in that too. But then also Libra is coming back and saying, like, okay, that's very important, but also we need to make sure that, you know, the way you act on your freedom is not harming the way that other people are acting on their freedoms, right? Based off of that freedom within yourself, you can act upon it, right? But as you're acting upon it, you need to be cognizant of your community, because that's not real freedom. If you get to just do whatever you want and everybody else's life is, you know, impacted by it negatively, like, yeah, you're experiencing a version of freedom, but it's not a version of freedom that's actually sustainable, and that's, you know, making for
Right.
newer freedoms to be imagined, right? Like, you have to figure out how to go about freedom in a way that is sustaining life. And, you know, I don't know why sustaining life came to me in that moment, but I just feel like it is about, like,
I think
it,
I can see why. I feel like Libra teaches that sustainability and like
yeah,
kind of pushes that when it comes to Aries in general, because Aries' natural way of being, like like their instinctive way of being, is not always the most sustainable. So I
yeah,
understand.
like, it's about the moment for Aries, and I think Libra is looking a little bit longer term. Um, and yeah, so I think when it comes to freedom, like, but you need both. You can't have one without the other. So you can't have a freedom in which everybody's cooperating, right? Doing the Libra thing, but nobody knows themselves. Nobody is free within themselves. They're still hiding. They're still afraid.
Right.
Like, that can't work. But you also can't
Right.
have someone who knows themselves so well and they're harming, you know, the people around them. So it's a very, you know, interdependent sort of thing. And I think agency and impact are just other words that describe freedom for me, because I think agency is about the same thing. Like, you have self agency, yeah, but you also have the agency to harm others or protect others. Like, you can, like, what do you do with the agency, kind of like?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
and then one thing I wanted to, like, another statement that came up for me was, like, everything you change changes you. And I was like, that came to me, but I realized it was also in a book that I read. So it is not an original. It's not original. So I went back to the book. And so our dear um author, Octavia Butler, I have a book next to me. Parable of the Sower is a great book for, I think the book is just, first of all, I know the main character has to be either Pisces rising, Sag rising, or just have those placements, because, like, the main character is literally writing her own Bible, like, full on, full on
That's
her
some me
own.
type shit.
No, literally, like, she is developing a religion. So we get to see the inner workings of her mind as she's developing this religion, but she also drops these passages from her Bible. And I'm like, I need to read this Bible. Anyways, the opening lines of this, I'll read this because I feel like this is very Aries Libra in and of itself. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. And that's how she starts it. And I just feel like that is the stuff of this axis, right? I feel like Aries is out there changing the world, they're making their presence on the world, but every time you do something, every time you make your presence, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Every action has equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
And in that process, you are changed again. Like,
Right.
so it's never going to be one directional. Like, it's never going to be Aries is the only one doing the changing. Like, Libra is there to tell you, like, oh, you changed me and I've just changed you because we've just had this whole interaction. It's like that third thing, right? Like, there's me, there's you, then there's us. And the us is the thing that's changing us and evolving us. And it's like, one of my statements was just, I am because of my relationship to all that surrounds me. So I am because of Silver. I am because of, the people in my life. There is no me without them, because that's how I came to be. Like, that's how I'm becoming, kind of. So you need those relationships to continue to shape you so you can shape them, so y'all can shape the world. Yeah, but becoming, I feel like, is the Aries Libra axis too, though. Like, I think it's definitely Aries energy because I feel like it's about the self and the development of self. But again, for it to be an action, you need to have something there that's
to have interactions, connections in order to have that growth or like expansion or
right. Like we are constituted in and through our relationships. Like, our relationships are life. They're like not life.
Our relationships are life. You heard it here, folks. Libra moon.
Literally. No, I'm saying, like, they have a life of their own that, like, are. I just want people to think of it like more dynamically. Like, it's also kind of like an energy that is shaping us.
Well, while you're saying relationships, it's the idea of love and how transcendent love is, and relationships really are love. Like,
is it an act of love?
Like the idea that, like, regardless of whether or not that person is present in your life, their love changed you, altered you. Whether that person is on this plane anymore or whether you're just not on speaking terms with that person, like, you wouldn't be who you are without having loved them. And I feel like that,
and that's how someone can carry, like, that's what I think people mean when they say, like, someone's spirit or energy carries on,
lives on,
like,
with them.
Right.
It's that separate entity that you all created together.
Right. And you're taking it with you, and it's changed you forever, and it's still changing you because it's like those feelings are
as you grow, it grow like it. Yeah.
It's an axis of life. It is an axis of life and love. Afterlife. Yeah. It's
and also, like, before life, like, thinking of where Aries came from.
Yeah, I know somebody's out there following us.
Yeah. Sorry, we're Pisces risings.
This
is how we connect, how we interact.
But yeah, no, I think to bring it back into more concrete, I guess, things, or one last poetic thing I'll mention is from Kelsey, who Silver brought up before. You can't harmonize with a muddy melody. That's the direct quote from a conversation.
And that was actually something that I love to hear. I didn't remember the muddy melody. But that makes, like, sense too. But, like, just hearing, like, just comparing Aries to a melody and, like, Libra to the harmony, it's like, it just sounds better. The melody is beautiful on its own, but it can always be uplifted. It can always be elevated with like community or with love or with another person. And I feel like regardless of how Aries may come off, at the end of the day, we're all human. We all desire that connection and that like love, and like they will always keep going. But it's like it can only be easier with
Right. And it's like, and I think we can like get into, I think we wanted to talk about how can Aries teach Libra to be a better Libra, and how can Libra teach Aries to be a better Aries. I think for Aries, like at the end of the day, Aries wants to explore, like they want to chart new territories. Like they want to go into the unknown, and they want something new
and they
and
want to
shiny,
discover, yeah.
and they want to discover, and they do. And I think like a great place where you can discover that newness and get that feeling of like, oh, this is unknown, is through relationships. So like as far as Libra helping Aries to continue to do that, like, yeah, we want to help Aries continue to be that ball of energy and light, and the one that's starting stuff. And it's like, you also need to know like what's worth starting, like, and what is the what are you going to get out of starting it. And also,
and you can always learn a little tact from Libras. You can always learn their charisma.
No, literally, one of my quotes was, "You catch more honeys with fly." I mean, no, oof.
You catch more flies with honey, baby.
Catch more flies with You catch more honeys by being fly, but like no. But yes, because it's like, again, burnout. I think Aries really need to be careful of burnout. Like, yes, you can do it, but like sometimes you won't be able to, and sometimes you won't have the energy to. So how about we try a way that helps you still get what you want, but not in a way that's going to make you exert so much energy? How can you start to learn lessons around Venus and attraction? How do you like move throughout the world in a more like Venusian way, which I know is hard, but it's hard for Aries being this martial sign. But when you learn that, you can learn a lot around how to get what you want without exerting so much of your energy, and using your energy for more, fruitful sort of experience.
Yeah. And this is not just something obviously that Aries can learn from Libra, but that we can all learn from Libra. Is that like that charm, that like things can just come to you. Like it's always okay to be responsive and not like necessarily like reactive or like in that way. Like we can always, like there can
respond
always
versus
be
react. That's a good one. That's a good Aries Libra. I like that.
And then as for something that I feel like Libra can learn from Aries, I think that while, like I said, while Libras are sensitive, I do think that they may struggle with that vulnerability of, of being like, this is me. Like, you can love me, you can hate me. This is just who I am. And I think that that's something that comes so naturally to Aries. They're just so like authentic with themselves, and they just know themselves, and they don't necessarily always worry about how that will be perceived. And I think that in comparison to Libra, who literally emotionally and physically struggles with like showing up as their true self and often hiding behind their environment or their community or others, I think that's definitely um like a goal or part of their journey is learning that vulnerability of just showing up, of being your true self, and expressing that shamelessly, and making their way towards the middle of that spectrum. And I feel like there's so much more that like both of those signs can learn from each other, and I feel like they're both very, very beautiful signs, and there's so much that all of us can learn from all of these signs in general. But
yeah, one thing I have that really speaks to what you just said is, I saw this tweet from an astrologer. I cannot remember who tweeted it, but they said, "Get out of your mind and into your heart." And I feel like that is what Aries is trying to tell Libra. Get out of your mind and into your heart, because like you are, and your mind is beautiful, and your mind is always going to be there, Libra, because you're a Libra, right? Like you're always going to be intellectualizing to an
Yeah,
extent.
you're an air sign.
Right.
Exactly.
But what in those moments where you do get out of your mind and into your heart, what can you open up new relationally? Like by getting
Exactly.
into your heart. Because once
And
you,
following that Martian desire and
yeah, that
passion.
burning, like, because there's something burning in everybody. And I think Libra, what might be burning in them is these new relationships, but how can you get an understanding of what burns within you outside of your relationships in order to make your relationships better? Like, you will actually,
Exactly.
like, you can have the kind of friend. I know Libras, like, when they have a good relationship, I know it feels so good for Libras because it's like this is generative. This is something right here. But you can't get there until you know what you need. You can't get there until you know, like, what makes you excited, what makes you like
Exactly.
passionate.
Like
You
what
can't
brings
just
you
be
that
worried
joy
about,
and
like,
that.
yeah, I feel like that Libras can get into trouble when they try to just collect friends because they're like, relationships, that's what I need, relationship.
Yeah,
But like, okay,
exactly.
now you have this collection of people that don't know you. You need to know
Exactly.
you in order to have the relationships that you deserve.
Right. Yeah. Mhm.
And then on that note, I just want to bring in a bell hooks quote from All About Love. Um, one of the quotes is, knowing how to be solitary is central to the art of loving. When we can be alone, we can be with others without using them as a means of escape. And I think that speaks very much to what Silver just said, around, not using your environment to hide. Like Libra, like Aries is like, come out of hiding. Like, I know
Mhm.
you're in there. Stop trying to escape in everybody else's opinions, perspectives, relationships,
Exactly.
and stand up. Like, this is
Stand
you.
up.
You are required for these relationships to be a thing. You have to be distinct. Um,
Yeah. Like there is you have this like you have the value, you are worthy of being seen, and I feel like that's really what Aries wants to teach like everyone in general. But like that's not something that I feel like Aries may struggle with all that much, and it's something that like for Libra I know doesn't come easily to them, but like the Libras out there, you are worthy and you are like beautiful and we want to see it.
I think Libras might find themselves, because I don't get the sense that, I think Libras' insecurities are mostly hidden. I think that outwardly, I think Libras, because they've already sort of tried to figure out the rules of social acceptance, they know they got Venus on their side. Like, they know they're gonna be able to kind of get the acceptance of others. But what we're talking about is the you that might not be accepted by others. We're talking about the you that, like, is
Like
like
your
a little bit
shadow,
more
like
raw. Yeah, like, are
and
just not as packaged, not as like,
yeah.
I think Libras can have a package to them, and they're confident in the package to them. But when
Mhm.
we take off the packaging, like, what's there, and like, that's what Aries is.
And like let us love you for that. I feel like they have this fear that maybe that they'll lose that relationship or whatever. And
Mhm,
if that is the case, then that person is not meant to be
mm,
in your life. And that's okay. It's also like learning to understand that some relationships are more valuable than others and that you don't need to just collect all these people, but it's about the people that you do have that are there that do love
mhm.
you for who you are. And I feel like that's another like lesson for Libra is like being able to decipher the like the actual like real relationships versus the superficial like
Or
you
yeah,
know
exactly. The
relationships.
idea of it. I have Aries teaches Libra to trust your gut. Like, Aries is all about guts. That's what makes Aries Aries. Like, they just have the guts. It's not that they're not
The
afraid.
gumption.
The
Mhm.
gumption, the like,
There's one thing an Aries has, it's audacity.
is audacity. And I think Aries is like, Libra, like, hello, where is it? You have a gut in there. Like,
Of
your instinct.
course.
That's why I think Aries gets impatient, and Libra can teach Aries patience, but Aries get impatient with Libras because it's like you're spending so much time weighing all of these factors. And when really the
Mhm. Just
only thing you
jump in
know is you.
like they do.
Right. And also I think Aries says it's okay to burn a few bridges. Like you don't have to keep all of your connections intact. Aries is like, it might be time to snip, like what's really going on here. And then I think, yeah, just knowing that like sometimes you do have to battle. Aries will teach Libra how to fight. Obviously, they're fighting with different with different weapons. But it's like, okay, a fight nonetheless. And I think Libra knows when it has to fight, but I think it's trying to postpone fighting for as long as possible.
Yeah, and like you said, Toni, when we were talking about it before, is that they don't necessarily have the same weapons. They don't have the same that like maybe an Aries might have. Like they're fighting with charm, beauty, with like, but it's I feel like they can always learn how to use what they do have and value what they do have.
Yeah, but I'll mention one Aries Libra example that I really enjoyed. So I went to go see I guess Lightyear is the name of it. It's like that movie that Pixar, like Disney came out with about the Buzz Light, like you know how Buzz Lightyear the toy is based on a movie, like in Toy Story, Andy has this. Okay, so the movie is about that. Like it's supposed to be that movie that the toy is based off of.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I hadn't heard of it, but that sounds cool.
Yeah, yeah, I went to see it. I was just like, every now and then I like a little kid movie. So I went to see it, and basically the premise was Buzz Lightyear, he ends up getting his space cadets trapped into this dimension, and he can't go back home to fix his mistake. He's a typical Aries character, very accomplished, like he's very like arrogant, honestly. But he always does shit alone. He always does things alone. And at any time things are getting in his way, he's like, I'll just do it by myself. Like, fuck it, I'll just do it. And I think that can be a very Aries, along with some other signs, but like, the act of doing it alone, that's where they thrive. They want to be alone. But then he just keeps failing. Fail, 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 fail. He literally cannot fix his mistake. He could not fix his mistake. And I think there's a whole lesson in that for Aries, one. But two, he realizes that he actually needs help. Like, and you get to see in leaning on people that he trusts or he develops trust for, he's able to accomplish his goal a lot better. And I think that's just, one of the many things that Aries and Libra are teaching each other around, it's great that you have so much fight in you and that you can do things. You have the audacity to do things alone, but there's always going to come a point where you can't do it alone, and you're going to need your relationships to help get you through. And I think that's what Libra's trying to, tell Aries too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that might be it. Like,
I think that's a good place to wrap up this beautiful Aries Libra axis. I think that both Toni and I have been changed with this discussion. I feel like this is like, I don't know, this is definitely, I think that this whole like episode was something I was nervous about, and it was like just in the way that I felt like I didn't know that I had a lot to say about the Aries Libra axis specifically. And Toni and I, had a conversation about ways in which I could channel that. And I feel like even just doing this podcast and moving through the fear was very Aries of me. So I feel like it was a beautiful experience, and we thank you all for tuning in to this episode.
Yeah, so I'm really excited we got to do that for y'all. I think Aries Libra axis is a perfect place to start. It really sets the tone for how the rest of the series is going to go. We're going to go in order from here. So next we'll be doing Taurus, Scorpio. And I just want everybody to, look in your chart and just see where these two signs fall. And based off of like the house significations of, where those signs are, like think of different ways you might see it coming to life in your life or around you, and get creative with it. And if you find that you disagree with everything, like, bring that too. That's what Aries would want you to do anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to just make sure I added in for the folks listening.
Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time on As Above,
So Below.
Wow. Okay. Cut the recording.